a tiny ship, an impossible dream. In 1903, the 70-foot Gjøa sailed into the Arctic carrying 7 men and a 400-year-old obsession. For more than 3 years, they would battle ice, isolation, and darkness in a frozen maze that had defeated every expedition before them. The Northwest Passage had swallowed ships, crushed dreams, and claimed lives by the hundreds. But Roald Amundsen wasn't like the explorers who came before him. For more than 4 centuries, explorers from England and Europe had searched for a northern sea route linking the Atlantic and the Pacific. Many vanished in the ice. Ships like Franklin's Erebus and Terror became frozen tombs. The Northwest Passage wasn't just a route, it had become an obsession. In the heart of Norway, young Roald Amundsen wasn't just listening to stories of Arctic heroes, he was living them. The tale that captured his imagination was the tragic saga of Sir John Franklin. In 1845, Franklin's expedition, with its 2 ships and 129 men, sailed into the Arctic in search of the Northwest Passage, and vanished. The mystery of their fate became Amundsen's obsession. When his mother's death freed him from his promise to study medicine, he dropped out of university and dedicated his life to polar exploration. His first real test came in 1897 as a member of the Belgian Antarctic expedition. Their ship became trapped in Antarctic ice for an entire year. A lesson that taught him survival depended as much on mental strength as physical endurance. By 1903, Amundsen was ready to become exploration's master. He had a 2-fold plan: navigate the treacherous Northwest Passage and pinpoint the new location of the magnetic North Pole. But ambition requires capital, and Amundsen had very little. He scraped together enough funds to purchase the Gjøa, a 70-foot herring boat, small enough to slip through the narrow, rock-strewn channels that had been death traps for massive vessels. When creditors threatened to seize it, Amundsen sailed out of Oslo under the cover of night. Thanks to his mentor, Fridtjof Nansen, who guaranteed his loans, Amundsen could sail as a free man. His crew consisted of 6 men, each handpicked for their skills and temperament. After crossing the Atlantic and resupplying in Greenland with sled dogs and fuel, the Gjøa turned westward into the icy heart of Baffin Bay. A ferocious storm descended, with waves crashing over the deck. A fire erupted in the engine room. But the crew smothered the flames with sand. Days later, the Gjøa struck an uncharted rock, grinding to a halt, until the tide lifted them free. By early September 1903, they reached the southern coast of King William Island. There, they found a small, sheltered bay. With the sea beginning to freeze, Amundsen made the crucial decision to stop for the winter. He christened the harbor Gjøa Haven, calling it the finest little harbor in the world. It would be their home for the next 2 years. As October fell, the sea around the Gjøa solidified into a vast sheet of ice. The temperature plummeted, and the world outside became a frozen desert. Days blended into one another beneath the pale glow of the Arctic sun. Frost formed inside their sleeping bags, and the sound of cracking ice echoed through the hull like distant thunder. Then, one afternoon, dark figures appeared on the horizon. Netsilik Inuit, masters of this frozen world. The initial encounter was filled with cautious curiosity on both sides, but the universal language of a warm smile and shared tea soon broke down barriers. Amundsen welcomed the Inuit families aboard the Gjøa, offering gifts of tea and tobacco. This was the beginning of a relationship that would prove to be the single most important factor in the expedition's success. The Netsilik became their teachers. They showed the Norwegians how to trade their heavy wool clothing for caribou fur parkas, which were lighter, warmer, and stayed dry even in fierce blizzards. They taught them the art of building an igloo, training sled dogs with short, sharp commands, and hunting seals at breathing holes. They learned to set nets beneath the frozen sea to catch Arctic char. Amundsen would later write that the Inuit clothing alone made the difference between life and death. For the first time in polar exploration history, a European expedition wasn't trying to conquer the Arctic. They were learning to live with it. The long, dark months of the polar night passed. Inside the Gjøa, the crew kept busy, repairing equipment and recording weather data. They became regular visitors in the Inuit camps, sharing food, stories, and laughter. By the time the spring sun returned, not a single crew member was sick. They had avoided the scurvy, frostbite, and depression that had destroyed so many who had come before them. With spring's arrival in 1904, Amundsen and engineer Peter Ristved set out with dog sleds on a 200-mile journey to locate the magnetic North Pole. The cold was brutal, a constant 30 degrees below zero. As they neared the pole, their compasses became useless, the needles pulled straight down by immense magnetic force. A sudden blizzard buried their sleds and nearly froze their dogs. They built a snow shelter and waited out the storm for 2 days. Using the sun and their instruments, they confirmed that the magnetic pole had moved approximately 30 miles north. Returning to Gjøa Haven, they found the sea still locked in ice. Another winter followed, the same endless darkness and isolation, but strict discipline and friendship kept morale high. By the end of that second winter, Amundsen and his crew were no longer just surviving in the Arctic. They were thriving in it. In August 1905, after 2 long years, the ice finally began to break apart. The Gjøa was free. They sailed west into uncharted waters, a maze of narrow passages and shallow, rock-strewn channels with massive ice floes shifting around them. Crewmen stood watch on deck, constantly calling out depth measurements. After 4 days of nerve-wracking navigation, they reached Cape Colborne. This was the point where previous explorers, sailing from the Pacific side, had been forced to turn back. The Gjøa had connected the 2 sides of the passage. In his journal, Amundsen recorded the monumental achievement with characteristic understatement. The Northwest Passage was completed. There were no grand celebrations, no triumphant cheers, just quiet exhaustion and the profound satisfaction of having achieved the impossible. But the Arctic wasn't finished with them yet. As the season turned, ice formed with startling speed, and the Gjøa was trapped once again, this time near Herschel Island, off the coast of what is now Canada's Yukon. A small community of whaling ships was also locked in ice, and a bustling settlement had sprung up along the shore. But Amundsen couldn't rest. The world needed to know what they had accomplished. In December 1905, he embarked on one of the most audacious journeys of his life. With 2 companions, he set out on skis, traveling over 500 miles across the frozen wilderness to Eagle City, Alaska, the nearest telegraph station. Weeks later, frostbitten but alive, he sent a simple message: "Gjøa has passed through the Northwest Passage." Roald Amundsen became a national hero overnight. Amundsen then skied the 500 miles back to rejoin his crew. But before they could finally sail for home, tragedy struck. Gustav Wieck, the expedition's magnetic observer, fell gravely ill with what was likely appendicitis. He died in April 1906, the only life lost on the expedition. By August, the sea was finally clear. The Gjøa sailed west, reaching Nome, Alaska, on August 31st, 1906. After 3 long, arduous years, the journey was over. They had crossed the top of the world. Roald Amundsen's success was a paradigm shift in polar exploration. He proved that small, agile expeditions, armed with knowledge and humility, could achieve what massive, brute force endeavors could not. By choosing to learn from the Inuit, he not only ensured his survival, but also mastered the skills that would later propel him to his most famous achievement, being the first to reach the South Pole. The Gjøa now stands outside the Fram Museum in Oslo. Amundsen himself summed it up best. Victory awaits him who has everything in order. Luck, people call it. In the end, it wasn't luck that got him through the Northwest Passage. It was preparation, respect, and the wisdom to understand that victory comes not from fighting nature, but from becoming a part of it. For more stories of impossible journeys, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next expedition.